So tell me about this Bible verse you read this morning.
Yeah. All right. So I was reading Proverbs 25. All right. And verse 28 really, really stood out to me. He that has no rule over his own spirit is like a city that is broken down and without walls. That's the King James version. And that scripture always stuck out to me specifically because it lets me to know that self-control is super important. And it also lets me to know that when someone doesn't have control over themselves, doesn't take a stand, doesn't live in accordance with their values, their principles, their virtues, wisdom, truth, all of that good jazz, they're susceptible to having their mind invaded like a city that's broken down without walls, right? Like back in the day, countries, the way they would fortify and protect themselves is they had walls, right? You had borders. You had the walls were a huge defense for you. And if a city's broken down and without walls, anyone can just come on in. And in a very real sense, as a human being, if you are not putting up boundaries, if you're not putting up some type of controls, and you're not living in accordance with values and principles, you're going to allow yourself to fall for anything. You're going to allow yourself to go with any whim, any lustful feeling, any emotion. You'll just react to things rather than responding accordingly, right? Like you'll just find yourself in situations that hurt more than help. And, that's really the importance of being able to have that sense of self-control and being able to understand who you are and what you stand for. And so that really, really stood out to me. And, it makes me think about, and this is a very hurtful thing to think about, but it makes me think about a childhood friend of mine that I had. He passed away. But what was something that stood out to me about him is that throughout his entire life, he didn't really have anyone to help guide him. He really just went with anything that was that seemed cool at the time, like outside influences, whether it was like gang members, different things like that, because he just wanted to have a sense of belonging. He wanted to have a sense that he mattered. And so even the people that weren't good for him, I noticed he would hang out with them. But then when he was hanging out with me and my brother, he'd be perfectly fine. It seemed like he wanted to do positive things. And so I realized that he was just susceptible to just going with the flow, whatever was influencing him at the time. And as I got older, we ended up leaving New York. We ended up moving to Delaware. And then I ended up joining the Navy, ended up being in Cali. And I remember going on leave one time and seeing him. And we just happened to run into each other. And you could clearly tell he had been through life, and he was sharing with me dang man, I've been caught up with this and that, and I kind of wish I would have did the same route that you did. It was just way more positive. And he was just sharing a lot of personal things with me. And then I remember when I was stationed overseas in the Middle East, I had learned that he had been killed, and it was due to gang violence. And it was one of those things where if someone was on the outside looking in, if they read this story, they would just be like, oh, okay, another gang member who got caught up. You're like, oh, okay, that's the life. But if you knew him how I knew him, you would realize that it was a person that was like a city that was broken down and without walls. Anything could just invade him. There was nothing guiding him. It was just whatever was able to get its grips on him at that time. And unfortunately, at that moment, it was a negative thing that had its grip on him, So I think that thinking about that story is something that makes me realize we really have to take control of our lives and really have guiding principles so that we don't just fall for anything.
Yeah, man, that's a very tough story. Thanks for sharing that. And the lesson I take away from that is, like you mentioned, we need to have these city walls up, and the city is our mind, right? If I'm understanding correctly, the city is our mind. The walls are our core values and the things that we want to live by. And the funny thing, not really a funny thing, but I'm from the hood, so I grew up seeing that as well with gangbangers and everything. Where like one of my fourth grade friends, I wasn't allowed to walk with him to elementary school, because I like to wear red. Red is my favorite color. But I wasn't allowed to walk with him because he said his grandma thought it wouldn't be safe. You know, and it was just because I was wearing red. So I grew up with that. I guess I grew up being around gangs. That's what I'm getting to. And then as a kid, we're impressionable. We want to throw up some gang signs, say some names, and just try and be cool and fun. And similar to your friend, I didn't really have any guidance. Like my mother, my mother, single mother with 3 kids, and we're living in the hood. And so we didn't really have a role model and to see what it looks like not living in the hood, right? We didn't really necessarily have a role model to see what it looks like being financially savvy, right? Or even knowing what a degree will actually do for you or an education. Like, because when you're in the school system, public schools, I'll just speak on LAUSD, Los Angeles Unified School District, because that's what I went through. You are harped on, like, hey, go to college, it's good for you. But as a kid, you don't really know what that means. You don't really see the opportunities that provides for you and your family. And so we're so impressionable. I didn't really have any of those core values. I got lucky that whenever I would start hanging out with some of those more questionable individuals, for some reason, I just never actually took that step to get in. For some reason, my mom never intervened. She couldn't even really intervene because, out of sight, I'm out of her sight, I'm out of her reach. This was in early 2000s, so I don't got no cell phone and stuff. You can't find me, right? So I guess like what I'm getting to is, as a child, I grew up in a similar environment, but because of circumstance and luck, me having no walls, I didn't really get invaded. My mind didn't get invaded by all of the other negative things that could have maybe even taken my life later on. Could have. Well, you never know. And now that I'm much older, I'm turning 32 next month at the time of this recording, it's so important for me to be like, all right, I got to build walls. Yeah. And it's not even I got to build walls for me. It's more so I have to build walls so that I could be a role model towards people who don't know what a wall looks like. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Is that something that you might also feel for yourself?
It is. I think that a lot of times we tend to be our own greatest enemy, right? And so I think that building the walls, it's really not just to protect yourself from invasion of others, but also to protect yourself from you, right? And I know that we all, as human beings, we have positive sides of us and negative sides of us. And so when I'm building up those walls, I'm really protecting myself from the negative side of me that would bring me down the path of destruction. And I've had to deal with that. I think that's one of the reasons why, I obviously, read scriptures and I pray and I have conversations with people like you and positive people, because in a very real sense, that's helping me to build and maintain those walls that are necessary, or else I myself might give in to, negative things that I don't like. They say an idle mind is the devil's workshop. I don't know if you ever heard that saying before.
Yeah. I've heard it. You've said it on this podcast.
I have said that. Yeah. Well, that's what they say, right? And it's like, so you if you don't occupy your mind intentionally, it's gonna get occupied with other things outside of your control. And so I have had to deal with that, and that was like from the time that I was a kid to even now. And so I think that that's one of the reasons why every day I'm like always keeping my eye on the prize. Like I talk to myself about what's important to me, and when I do certain things, sometimes I go down the rabbit hole of what does this result in and what does that result in, because then that allows for me to stay disciplined, because I have my eye on a bigger prize. It's not like I'm just going with the flow, like, I don't know what's in it for me today.
Well, it sounds like you have your eye on the prize, yes, but what it sounds like is that you also have a conscious like effort in controlling what you do. Yeah. From the whole story about your friend, it sounded like he didn't necessarily have control of the things that he could do. And maybe his eye was on the prize. He because when he talked to you, like, I wish I went through your path. It's a better path. So his eye sounded like it looked like he was looking at the prize. It's just.
Well, honestly, I don't think so. I think it was one of those things where he didn't even know what the prize was. Like, what was the prize for him?
From that moment when, again, I don't know him like that, but it sounded like when he was saying how he wished he went through your route, your lifestyle was the prize.
I think it was hindsight, right? Like, I
after
think,
the fact.
Yeah, as an afterthought, you know, because it was like when you end up living a life as a city that's broken down and without walls, after you've been invaded, it's easy for you to say, dang, if we had only did this, then we would have been prosperous and not had, you know, but up until the point of invasion, you might be so naive because you don't ever think that the attack is happening. You don't see it coming because it was just sunny today and now it's all stormy. You know, it's like, what the heck? And it happens like that all the time. It's like right when we least expect it, you know, things creep up on us because we've had our guards down. We weren't even thinking about that. And so I think for him, he was just more so reflecting on where he was. And it was like a position of regret. It was like, man, like, I wish I would have done it. And what was interesting to note was that he actually could have done certain things to change course. But at that point, he had already been to jail. He had already had a record. And I think he felt like he was in too deep to even go backwards. Or to change course, rather. I think that's the danger of living like a city that's broken down without walls. It's that sometimes you get to the point where you feel like you're too deep. You've already been infiltrated so heavy that you're like, well, this is just the life that I'm stuck with. And so I think that's really one of the important things that we must note as listeners is that you want to prevent yourself from having to suffer that same type of defeat, so to speak. You know, you want to be prosperous, and that's the whole point of putting up boundaries.
What's going on, you guys? I gotta interrupt this episode because there's a lot of value that me and Sam are sharing. But the thing is, we don't have enough people leaving their reviews letting us know how we could help them. So can you do me a favor? Spend 10 seconds, leave us a 5-star review, and review us. Tell us what value we're giving to you. I'm so amped up, I didn't even say that right, but you know what I mean. So take 10 seconds, do that for me real quick. Let's get back to the episode. I think there's also two types of people. There are the ones who they're around people already who are showing them how to be prosperous, showing them how to develop the core values that will help them in the future. And then there are those who are kind of like credit debt. They have a lot of credit debt. Their walls are kind of beat up and they're trying to figure out how to rebuild them. So like, for example, I feel that I'm more so coming from a city with broken down walls into a city with walls now. And the reason why, like I mentioned, when I was younger, like I just saw I saw a lifestyle that had no walls. And from what I saw and the statistics that we always see, children in households with single parents or children also in these type of neighborhoods tend to not really make well with their life, unfortunately. That's just the statistics. You could do that across the board, across the United States. That's just how it is. And I didn't have any guidance. I didn't know what a wall looked like, a properly built wall with great foundations looked like. So so as an adult in the early 30s, I started recognizing what a wall looked like in my mid-20s, and I've been working my way backwards just so I could create a proper foundation for it. And I think there's a yes, it would have been nice if I started off building it right. But, no use crying over spilled milk. What can we do now to just rebuild? And so that's where it's like, for what worked for me is, it wasn't, yes, like the people who were born into well-off families who are trying to help others, your Gary Vaynerchuk, your Tony Robbins, and other people like that. they helped motivate me to want to change. But it was really the people who were down in the gutter and rebuilt themselves, and now they're trying to help other people rebuild themselves. They were the ones that influenced me the most to take change or make change. One of the people who really affected me on an emotional side of getting more vulnerable with my feelings wanted to kill himself. He had the handgun in his hand and was about to shoot himself, and then it just, when he pulled the trigger, it was an empty chamber. So he got lucky, and now because he didn't take his life, he was able to affect me. And another mentor I have, he used to be in prison, and he talks about his story and how he's changing lives now. So what worked for me is seeing the people who were down in the gutter build themselves up, and now they have one of the greatest walls out there. Their mind is always filled with positivity, with abundance, and they're trying to share with other people. They're still a little rough around the edges because they grew up in that neighborhood, that environment, but their intention is to be as good as they can be.
Yeah, no, that's great to note, because I think you never, like, we were talking about this in a previous episode. You're the sum of your experiences, so of course they're gonna have the rough around the edges, but in some respects that's also necessary, because it's not gonna allow them to be as naive as they once were, which allowed for them to be invaded. Like, it's like they didn't know anything, so now they're protected. But my question to you is, because you brought up something that was like pretty like good for somebody who didn't have walls, and so now they recognize, hey, I need to get walls. Like, what are some like practical steps someone can take so that they can actually get to the point of laying down that foundation so that they can build up the walls necessary?
I think there's 4 different practical steps, or 4 different categories someone could work on. Those 4 are faith, family, friendship, and finances. No, excuse me. Faith, family, friendship is part of family. Faith, family, fitness, and finance. So in terms of faith, not necessarily a religious faith or a spiritual faith, but just having an idea of what lifestyle you want to have, what kind of person and the way that you interact with the world and the way you perceive the world. That's what I mean when I say faith. And then kind of learning more into that. So if that is religion, studying the religion. If you're more like, Christian, obviously look into Bible study. Look into what people are preaching about that, and any other religion. I can't speak on the others because I don't really know it like that. And then when it comes to family and friendship, that is just building up ways to actually socialize. Learn how to socialize with people, and not be not a lonely person, but not be alone. Because when I've been alone, not lonely, when I've been alone, I realized that I couldn't interact with the world the way I wanted to interact with the world. And because I couldn't interact with the world didn't interact with me. And so that's just a revolving circle of going down the rabbit hole. And to get out of it, you have to learn how to interact with the world. That's just how it is. You can't hide. You can't hide. The fitness part is that an active body is a healthy body, which means your mind is working right. You're thinking, you feel better about yourself. Even though you don't feel like working out, when you do work out, you feel better about yourself. Automatically, it's one of the best energies that you could ever get naturally without taking in any type of stimulants. And when you like the way your body feels, you like the way it looks, you like what you see in the mirror. That just tends to be what it is. And then the finance side, actually for me, was the finance side. The finance side is what was my trigger point. Was because I was tired of living paycheck to paycheck. I wasn't even living paycheck to paycheck. I was actually doing advanced paychecks, cashing out advanced checks. And I was like, this sucks.
So like you always owe something.
Yeah, because I was always taking early. And I paid it off, but I always paid off with interest. So I was always behind. I was never on time or even early. And it was one of those where I was like, wait, I have a white collar job in a AC place with free coffee, snacks and all this. I'm wearing slacks and a button up shirt. Why is my finance so shitty? And because I wanted to work on one of those 4 F's, faith, family, fitness, and finance, I just focused on one. Me working on one and getting improvements on that had like a halo effect where I wanted to improve in the other factors. And so just focus on one. That's my recommendation. Don't do everything at once, because when you try and catch 5 rabbits, you'll never catch one. Just focus on one, see improvements in that aspect, and as you see improvements, you notice that you could do better, and that you want to be around people who want you to do better, and then that's just how the snowball evolves.
Yeah, it's important to realize that a wall, you got to build it like a brick at a time, right? And so I think that that's what you're pointing out. And you were talking about the 4 F's. 3 of them you were working through, but one of them really stood out to you, the finances. And so like that can show you that like you can have most of the wall complete, and then you can have a section of the wall that's not completed, and you're still susceptible to invasion because that's your weak point.
Yeah.
And so you have to...
By the way, I really love this wall analogy because I played a lot of like Rome, Total War, and Civilization. So like in an actual practical stance where you were pretty much I was a general manager for creating civilizations and, you know, cities and all that.
Yeah.
Walls were imperative to defending my settlements so that invading players could not, you know, defeat me.
Yeah.
So I really love this analogy because I keep thinking about actual civilization. Yeah.
No, civilization.
Yeah.
Because it's true, right? Like it's like it just is what it is. And you know, like going back to it, it's like you're pointing out that weak point. And so you can see how the enemy can still invade into that. And here's the thing to note is that when you have a weak point in one area, even if you seem to be sound in the rest of them, if you are being invaded in those other areas, you're then gonna do what you can to defend that one area that's a weak point. And now you're leaving the rest of your walls unguarded, which now makes those susceptible to being destroyed as well. And so what I've noticed is that if there's a weak point in any of my walls, I personally will seek out guidance from people who are strong in that section of their wall.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that I now have a team that can help me build that section competently. Like sometimes that's really the battle, is that we don't even know how to build that section of the wall, whatever it is that we're lacking in. And so we're just going through it like, we're stuck. But you don't have to build that wall alone, right? Like you don't have to feel like everything has to be on you. You can really get help from the experts. You get those people who are sound in that area. So if it's finances, I'm going to reach out to financial experts or someone who's a role model in my life who completely has it all together in that area. In fact, you might be strong in one area and someone else, you know, they might be weak in that area and vice versa, and y'all can help each other, right? Like if Rami's strong in something that I'm weak in, he can guide me and I can guide him in something else. And now we're helping each other because iron sharpens iron. Like we can help build the walls together. And I think that that's really the whole goal of like building your wall, is you want to build it wisely, and you want to make sure that each time you add another brick, it counts. It matters, and you want to be able to do it with intention, with purpose, and don't just leave it up to chance. Don't just let anyone add to your brick, because that brick may not even be the right brick. Like it can't just be anyone that you bring into your circle, right? So you have to audit that as well. But the point is that you don't have to build the wall alone.
I agree with that. And what that sounded like is alluded to not just your peer group, but also mentorships. And the way that I approach looking at these people to help me build my wall is not necessarily like, yes, there's some specialties, there's specialists, but they all had these 4 categories that they were really high on already. That's the first identifier. Like they're doing great in family relationships and friendship, they're doing great with their faith, they're doing great with their fitness, and they're doing great with their finances. If all 4 of those check marks aren't hit, then I actually don't look at them for help. Because they wouldn't be able to speak on it. They wouldn't be able to relate to me when I'm like, hey, I'm doing great. Like fitness has always been my easiest thing. That's the easiest thing because that's the thing that like it's just me, right? For some reason it was just easy. When it came to finances, that was like, all right, just find another job. But when it came to relationships and stuff like that, certain people couldn't relate to me, and I found it easier that they could relate to me if they were good with their fitness. They were already good with their finance, and it's like, okay, well, we're good here. How do we get there? Because if I speak to someone who's good with finances but doesn't know fitness, they're not going to relate to me when I say I have mental or physical challenges going on right now, and that's why it's affecting my finances. They can't see that correlation. And so I guess I'm trying to find like a well-rounded individual who could see why something that doesn't seem like it's part of the same department will affect it.
I think that's an interesting take, because I think that can be true. I think that it is possible that you can just go to like your specialist specifically, because I don't think everyone has it all together in every single area. Some people do, but sometimes those people who have it all together in every single area, they may be so busy that they may just be focused on those different things, and you might have to reach out to the person who is just strong in the area in which you lack. I think that's like one of the things that makes teams so effective, is like you don't have to have everybody on the team be good in every single thing, but we just need everyone to be on the same page, understand what the common goal is, and I need you to play your part. And I think that that's really what I need more so from anyone that I seek help from. It's like, I don't need you to be perfect in what you do, but I do need for you to completely understand what I'm going through. And as long as you can make that correlation in your mind and you're able to add value, I think that that's what matters for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I guess the way I said it made it sound like I wouldn't. So anyone who's a specialist that I would reach out to, like obviously they're specialists in whatever subject I'm asking for help on, but at the same time I know that they're working on the other categories, or that they started off pretty well on it. They may not maintain the high levels there are, but I know that they know how to develop all those other categories. That's what I meant. It's not what I meant to say is that I'm not just going to go to someone who only focuses on finances in their life. I want to speak with someone who can help me in one department, but they on their personal end they still work on those for themselves.
Oh yeah. No, and that's, it really is sound to do that, because again, you're talking about having a complete wall. You're talking about, hey, like these are my guiding principles, these are my values. Clearly, if this also matters to you, and you already have a wall that I'm looking to have, that's what I need. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, and we kind of got stuck on these 4 Fs that I said. First off, that's not my 4 Fs. I got that from Bedros Keuilian and Sean Whalen. But there's other things that people use that works well for them, and I would definitely recommend taking a look at other systems, other systems or categories that may work out for you. For me, those 4 things tend to be the easiest to remember, and I could personally relate whatever I do into those 4 categories. If you can't do that, then those 4 categories may not work for you.
Yeah, and I like those 4 categories, but like you said, like other people may have other things they care about, and I think that that's the whole point of building the right wall, is just understanding what your values are, what are your guiding principles. That way you can reject anything that does not add to that, and you can accept anything that does.
I agree. Yep, I like that.
Yeah, that's all I got.
I got nothing else to add to that. Yeah.
So
unless you ask me more questions, I got nothing else to add to that.
No, that's all I got. And we thank you so much for tuning in. We love having these conversations with you. Please make sure you share this with someone else so that they too can get great value out of this content. And I'm Sam Hay. This is Romi Sunga. And until next time, Mindset Rebooted. Sometimes when things go wrong, you can't blame life. Cause when you shot your shot, what was your aim like? What were you targeting? Cause if it ain't right and you still go with it, then that is on you.